Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
And we're live. Welcome everybody to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As always, I am your host, Duck, and I want to thank you for joining me this evening on another edition of Photography Q&A. So if you have your questions, hopefully I'll have answers. Okay. Before we do that, let me just go over real quick. Coming up, uh, I think I'm pretty much done with workshops this month, except the private one I'm doing with Bill. Um, I don't have anything public scheduled until next month. Beginning of next month, I have two workshops back to back on Saturday, October 5th through Milford Photo on off-camera flash basics. Basically, we're going to be taking a speed light, a little radio trigger, and we're going to use our speed lights outdoor, basically in an outdoor environment, and get you understanding how you can use it to really enhance your natural day photos. Um, so, and then on Sunday, through the Art League of New Britain, I'm doing a very intensive 3-hour workshop on portrait lighting. So we're going from outdoors with a little portable strobe to indoors with multiple studio lights. So if either one of those or both, feel it's something that you want to jump in on, just realize the flash one, the strobe one is with Milford Photo. So you have to go to Milford Photo on meetup.com and register there. And for the studio lighting one, you have to go to the Art League of New Britain website, which is alnb.org, and sign up through there. Or you can go to my Facebook group page, Learn Photography with Duck. I have posted them on the events page with links to the registration pages. Okay. All right. I want to thank Alan for joining me this past Saturday. Not at one event, but two events. He came out to the Snap Happy Photo Hunt Challenge game, which we held at the Waterbury Green. And I was kind of hoping for some more people to show up, but hey, we had a good time nonetheless. Alan, I will ask you for some endorsement. I mean, your thoughts on it.
Uh, my thoughts. The game is a lot of fun. I think we had five or six people there,
Yeah.
and what made it very easy is just by you didn't have to pick out a subject. You didn't have to even think. You pick out a card, and on the top of the card it gave you a skill level, 1, 2, or 3. So even at that point, it doesn't matter. It's let's say I had one card that says backlighting, and so you have to walk around the park a little bit, use your imagination a little bit, find something that's backlit. And I think I found a watchtower, and I tried with that. Um, and and then the timing, using time limits like 5 minutes and 10 minutes, that made a difference because it gave you more. Okay, I have to find something. I got to look at it, but it also made you think a lot faster. And there's no limit to if you got a park area. There's no limit to what you can find in
Mm,
there. There's amazing how many things you can find in a place I'd never been to before. But just by looking around and seeing your environment, yeah, it worked out. I thought quite well, quite well.
awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah. Like I said, I've run it in the past and I've always gotten some really, really good feedback from it. Everybody seems to enjoy it. So, But anyways, the game is coming along for anybody who's interested. So I think I'm pretty much done with the development. I think I've got it to the point where I got all the kinks out of it, all the misspellings, all the typographical errors. I was encouraged to change the name from something generic like Photo Hunt to something that's a little bit more unique, simply because you cannot register a common name like Photo Hunt. So that was a good tip from a lawyer that deals with intellectual property. So that's going to be my next step is meeting up with this intellectual property lawyer, um, getting this registered and copyrighted, and then I'm going to start a GoFundMe type thing to see if I can bring the unit price down. Because right now, my cost for a single one of these is $50, which is expensive. I'd like to bring it down so that the per unit price is $10, and possibly retail it at $15 to $20. So even if I get, the unit price down to about $15, I'd be happy with that. Um, uh, I want to make these available, so I don't want them overpriced. I don't want to price them out of people's reach. And unfortunately, on a single unit, um, on a single unit price level, it's just way ridiculous. But anyway, so that's the plan for this game. It's been about 8 years in development, part time, back, off. Uh, the bottom of the list. All right. You go down a few more bottoms, and the back page of that's where this project resided for the longest time. So it's taken a long time to get it to this point. Working on it occasionally over the years, and I'm pretty proud of it. And like Alan said, it's a great way to get out with your camera, challenge yourself without really needing to overthink it. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. What I have today to kind of get the conversation started is a little discussion on ISO. And today's discussion, I can talk. Today's discussion came about from a discussion about ISO and noise on one of the Facebook groups that I pop into occasionally. There's a lot of people that were kind of giving very generic information. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is very general information, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. So I figure I just do I don't want to get really deep into the weeds on ISO because I don't think you really need to. I don't think any of you are doing work that really requires a deep understanding of ISO. But I wanted to kind of point out a couple things for you to pay attention to that may help you with some of the work that you're doing currently. All right. Especially if any of you are working in an environment where there's lower light, and that could be, early mornings, late afternoons when the sun's starting to drop outdoors, or if you're doing any kind of studio work where you don't necessarily are using flash photography, but you might be using continuous lighting, and lighting, as you know, continuous lighting isn't as strong. So you have to rely on your camera to kind of bring the exposure up. So having this basic knowledge may help you. So what I did is I set up a little, let me see if I can, I'll point this camera, my studio camera, Where's my studio camera? There it is. There we go. All right. I set up this little kind of just still life setup uh, against a dark background. And instead of using flash, ooh, look at all that noise. There we go. Instead of using flash, I just used the studio LED lights, the overhead lights, to light it. Now in my studio, I have 4 rows of lights. 1, 2, 3, 4. And currently the backlight right up here is off. All right. So I can control how much light I put into this studio space. As you guys know, I do mostly tabletop work with flash. So these overhead lights really don't do me any, aren't useful to me other than allowing me to see what I'm doing. They don't influence the work that I do. So the nice thing is I have them set up on 3 different switches, so I can control the amount of light to a certain extent in my studio. All right, so out of the 4 banks, the 2 middle ones are on a separate switch, and the far one here and the far one back there, they are on individual switches. So what I did is this one here is with 3 lights, and then I just turned the once overhead and used the light over there in order to kind of like reduce the available light, make it darker in order for me to bump up my ISO to ridiculous levels. All right. So what I wanted to do is kind of show you how different exposures at different ISO levels can really affect your image. And I'm going to share at the end a little trick that you can use to kind of control it and mitigate it a little bit more in a way that maybe you may not be aware of. Okay. Now, of course, we all know that most editing software has some kind of noise reduction capabilities. All right. And Lightroom has noise reduction. And I've shared in the past an alternate method of using noise reduction. That's kind of interesting within Lightroom. Okay. But so let me go ahead and switch this. Let me share my screen. Screen share. All right. Okay, so what I did is, like I said, actually, let me do this. And, all right, kind of maximize it here. Oops. This is the scene that I did, all right? And of course, I'm using available light, which is the overhead LED lights. All right. And I started off, and hopefully you guys can see this. Oh, where is my spotlight? All right. Hopefully you guys can see this. This is the information for this particular image. All right, you can always look up here to see exactly what settings I used for all these images. All right, and this one was ISO 100, or no, I'm sorry. Yes, ISO 100, 1/100th of a second at 1.4. All right, so I was using, just so you understand, I'm using a prime lens, which allows me to really open up my aperture to 1.4, and on the tight side, I think it was f22. All right, so not 36, f22. Okay, so for the lens, That's my working range, 1.4 to 22. All right. The camera that I'm using is a Canon 5DSR, which has a ISO rating between 100 and 6,400. All right. And what I did for all these images, I didn't bother with thirds or 2/3 stops. I went full stops. Okay. So each image is one stop difference on the settings. So just so you understand. So the first set of images, what I did is this is the image, or this is the setup shot at the wide open opening of my lens, which is 1.4. And I set the exposure to be a proper exposure, correct exposure for the scene at 1/100th of a second. All right. So the first series, all I do is, oh, wait a minute. Where's my, there we go. All I do is I close up my aperture. I leave everything else alone. The ISO stays the same and the shutter stays the same. All right. All I'm doing is changing the aperture. All right. And as we know, when we close up one part of our exposure triangle, we are either adding to or removing light. Okay, so this is the last one at f11. So I didn't even go all the way to f22 because, you know, we have a black screen pretty much. We can just barely make out the skull here. And I figure, you know, going any further than that, it's not going to make any sense. Okay, so seven frames gives me a good indicator of how we are losing light every time we make a stop change. Okay, makes sense? This should be fairly basic. Okay, the next set, I said, well, obviously what this is about is pushing our ISO. All right, so here we are back to the beginning. We have ISO 100, f1.4 at 1/100th of a second. All right, and then the next image, what I did is I increased my ISO, all right, by one stop. So I went from 100 to 200. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to maintain the same correct exposure across all the images. So you might see some slight changes, you know, between each frame, simply because obviously it's not 100% perfect. It interprets light slightly different every time you make, you know, a drastic change, especially with your aperture, because your aperture controls your depth of focus. All right. So there might be some slight shifts you'll notice. All right. But this is ISO 200, ISO 400, ISO 800, 1600, and 3200, and finally 6400. Okay. Now you're probably looking at this and you says, well, I'm not noticing any difference. And that's great. Okay. At this scale, you probably will not notice any difference. So let me go back to the beginning of that set. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in to this area here. All right. Because this area allows us to see a variety of tonal, we have a wide dynamic range in our scene. Okay. So in our scene, we have bright highlights. They're not blown out, but they are fairly bright. All right. We have a white label that is properly exposed, so it's not being blown out. Okay. But we also have a dark background, also not being crushed. All right, it's not being crushed to full black. And we have a black bottle that also is not being crushed to full black. So what this means that our exposure range is well within our dynamic range of, of the lighting. Okay. So we don't have any blown out highlights. We don't have any crushed blacks. Everything fits nicely within that dynamic range. All right. So this allows me to really play around with the ISO settings and see what does the ISO changes do in my image. All right. Now, hopefully you understand that the higher your ISO number, the more sensitive to ambient light, or no, let me correct that. The higher your ISO, the more sensitive to light in general. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. To light in general, your camera is. But at a certain point, what happens is the sensitivity becomes so sensitive that the sensor itself, which is created by millions of photoreceptors, becomes a little unstable. And what happens as it collects the light, it doesn't collect across all the photosensors uniformly. And what ends up happening is you might have one photocell that's receiving, let me rephrase that. You may have two photocells side by side receiving the same amount of light, but one will charge a little bit faster than the other one. And the result will be that you will have one pixel that's brighter than its neighbor, even though they both receive the same amount of light for the same amount of time under the same conditions. Okay, so that's one of the side effects of the sensors. Over the years, they've gotten better. Noise quality has gotten ridiculously good. It used to be if you shot at ISO 800, you're going to see a noticeable degree of noise in your image.
Doc,
Yeah,
are you saying the higher the ISO, if something has a lot of light, that's going to more of a chance of that area being blown out?
correct.
Okay.
Well, uh, uh, yes. Well, yes and no. All right. You're still working under the rules of proper exposure. Okay. But the latitude of the amount of light that gets collected by each photocell, the plus minus error increases, if that makes sense. All right. So
Okay.
let me see if I can explain this a little bit. Okay. All right. Draw. Okay. We have a photocell. Can everybody see the blue okay, or should I change it?
Yep.
All right. We have the photocell. All right. And let's say this is at ISO 100. Okay. And then we have a photocell at, what was 6400. Okay. They're both the same photocell. All right. We have a lot of light hitting this photocell, but here we have a little bit of light. Okay. So in order for this to fill up that photocell, we need a very fast shutter speed. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. To fill up this photocell with the lower light, we need to keep this photocell open much longer. All right. So maybe I'm just picking arbitrary. All right. Let me say 1/10 of a second. Right? Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
This is standard exposure. Okay. When we have a second photocell, all right, under the same conditions, all right, by the time the 1/10 of a second clicks off and the shutter closes, this cell maybe collected, this tiny, 1/millionth of a percent difference. Okay. All right. An imperceptible number of in terms of electronic charge, but there is a noticeable difference in the brightness between this cell and this cell. Follow?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And this adjoining photocell, all right, because it's at the cusp of where the shadow transition, it's still receiving the same amount of light, okay, but maybe these two photocells are pointed at the skull, and this photocell actually lines up with part of the background, okay? So
Doc,
now,
question, Doc. Would a histogram be any help at all in a situation like this, in judgment?
well, for your overall exposure, yes, but it doesn't do anything to mitigate noise.
Oh,
Okay.
yes, yes. Okay,
So we're talking about noise. So
right.
now this photocell maybe has a lot less light representative. Okay. But these two, 1 and 2, they should be, in theory, they should be equal. They should have both the same amount. But because of technology, it's not quite there. The planets didn't align. Whatever the case may be, they don't receive the exact same. So this pixel looks brighter than this pixel. All right. And of course, when you're looking at a sensor, we're looking at a grid, all right, with all adjacent. All right. So if all these are supposed to have the same amount of light hitting it, maybe this one is just a little bit brighter than this one. All right. This one's a little bit brighter. All right. Not by much, just a little bit, right? Maybe this one's a little bit brighter. And now you can see how these brighter ones sporadically spread out through this matrix starts creating that noise pattern. You see that? Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Now, the reason for that is because we are artificially boosting the signal, all right, of the sensor in order to get this pixel to match this pixel. All right? Because it's the same exposure, just different lighting conditions. All right? Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking our skull and globe, and I want to maintain the same exposure under different camera settings and under different lighting situations. Okay, so as soon as I turn off the light, I need to increase my settings on my camera in order to make that darker image look the same exposure as the brighter image. Right? Make sense? Everybody follow that? Or did I lose you?
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Here, let me go back. Okay.
By the way, that noise was ringtone. Sorry about that.
Oh, I didn't hear it. Okay. All right. These two images, the exposures are the same, correct? You look at both, the exposures are the same, right?
Mhm.
Yes.
The only difference is this one here is at f 1.4. And this one here is at f, what was it, 16. Okay? So this is literally getting the candlelight, and this one's getting the bright light. Okay? Because this is a bigger opening than this one. All right?
Yes.
All right. So in order to get this to be the same, all right, this is at 1/100th of a second. This is at, I don't even remember now.
6400.
No, shutter speed. It's probably like 1/10 of a second. I don't
Oh,
know what
one tenth.
I don't know what it was, but I have
One
to
tenth.
keep the shutter open longer in order for this exposure to match this exposure, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the photocells here, all right, and the photocells here, they are all collecting the same amount of light. It's just with this one, it takes longer, all right? If we have a little clock, it takes longer than this one,
Okay.
right?
So,
Simple,
so,
simple
so how
exposure.
do you figure? I mean, the first one was 1/100th, and the other one was 1/10th. How would I know to go to 1/10th time of uh, shutter speed?
Well, you would calculate you can either calculate your math, all right, or you can just adjust your shutter until you get the same exposure. Okay, so let's go. Let's see, what are we? One. Oh, okay. Oh, that's what I did. I changed the ISO. That's right. I changed the ISO. So we're at ISO 100 for this first one, and ISO 6400 for the last one. Okay. So as basic, actually here, let me do this. Where's my camera settings? All right, let me put this up so. All right, everybody see my camera settings?
Yeah.
Okay, so on that side over there, we have our ISO. So, nope, I'm sorry. We have our shutter speed. Okay. On this side, we have our aperture. Okay. So, in order to, let's get rid of that. In order to keep our settings at 0, all right, if we have, a slow shutter, okay, a slow shutter, we're going to need a wide aperture. No, I'm sorry. No, 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 nope. In order to maintain 0, if we have a slow shutter, okay, means we're allowing more light in, all
Mm-hmm.
right, we're going to need to close up our aperture, okay? Inversely, all right, if we have a fast shutter, okay, the fast shutter robs us of a lot of light. In order to compensate, we're going to need to open up our aperture. Okay, so all this should be basic, fundamental exposure practices with your camera, right? Everybody follow?
Yes.
Okay. The problem is down here, when there's a lot of light, all right, actually, I can't even see. Yeah, when there's a lot of light, okay, we can very easily shoot at ISO 100, all right? A lot of light, base value ISO 100. It's when the light starts diminishing that we need to compensate, okay? So we can compensate by shooting slower. We can compensate by opening up our exposure, our aperture, okay? Or if one of these two is not available to us, we can increase our ISO, right?
Yes.
All right. When we increase our ISO, this is where we get our problems with noise. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now, if we were to, now the one thing you got to understand is, let me turn those off. Different camera models are going to handle noise differently. Newer cameras with the newer sensors have better noise control than older cameras. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, larger sensors tend to have better noise control than smaller sensors. All right. Because the photoreceptors are a little bit larger. All right. Okay. So we zoom in here. All right. And actually, let me see. Can tab. Let's go to 100. There we go. All right. All right. If we zoom in really, really tight, okay. I don't know if you guys can see that. All right. But when we start pixel peeping here, all right, when we come in really, really close, we can see that these gradations, all right, especially in the dark, all right, because noise is going to appear more prevalent, more pronounced against one of two things. Large fields of color, such as, this black background, and in shadows over light areas. All right. Noise tends to get kind of camouflaged in light areas. It's the dark areas, and especially dark open areas, where the noise becomes a little bit more prevalent. All right. So here we are, relatively decent shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. It's nothing fast, but it's also nothing slow. Okay. It's not one where it's out of the realm of, never being able to shoot, right? And ISO 100. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As we increase the ISO, all right, in order to maintain the exposure, we have to close up our aperture. I'm still keeping at 1/100th of a second. The only thing I'm doing is I go up one stop in our ISO, and I go down one stop in my aperture in order to maintain that equilibrium in our exposure. Okay, because what I want to do is I want to start seeing how well my camera handles high ISO areas of an image. Okay, so here's at 200, and it's really not much of a difference. Okay, here is 400. Again, not too bad. I'm starting to see a little bit of noise. And you guys are probably looking at your screen and saying, I don't see any difference. All right. Which is good. If you don't see it, it's not an issue. Okay. Here's at 800. At 800, most cameras will really start showing it. Okay. And at 800, there's another problem that's starting to appear in this image that's going to be a little bit more noticeable as I go along. The background that I'm using is corrugated plastic that's been spray painted flat black. Okay, so there is a texture, and the texture is, you're going to see lines going across horizontally. Okay, when you start seeing that, that's not part of the noise. That's part of the background that I used. Okay. What I want to do is eventually I'll probably zoom in even tighter and see if we can really notice the noise. All right. But this is ISO 800. This is ISO 1600. Okay. Because my depth of field is getting greater, we're now able to see that ripple effect of the corrugated background. But we're starting to see a texture in that black background. Okay?
Are you saying if your lens is wide open, that is less of a chance of noise being
No,
shown?
no,
No? Okay.
no. I just want to explain that the lines that you're seeing is caused by my background and it's not a noise pattern.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then here's at 3200. All right. Now you guys can probably see this. All right, especially in the darker areas. Kind of looks a little bit like sandpaper. And then at 6400, all right, look at the globe. We're starting to lose a little bit of detail in the globe as well, because noise is going to disrupt any kind of fine detail in your image. Okay. All right. Can you guys see the difference or not? Let me let me see if I can do this. Let me do a side-by-side compare. Zoom in. Okay. This is at ISO 100, and this is at ISO 6400. All right. Can you see the difference?
Yes.
Well, the depth of
Yes.
field changes quite a bit.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
The depth of field changes quite a bit.
Oh, yeah. Because in order to compensate for the increase in my ISO, I have to adjust it some way. And in this one, I adjusted by closing down my aperture. So yeah, the aperture, the depth of field is going to get a little bit crisper. Okay. But what I want you to notice, all right, is the texture in these areas. All right. See, this is nice and smooth. All right. While this one definitely very grainy. All right. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Let's see if we can. Can I go even? Let me see if I can make it go even tighter. Let's go to 200. There we go. Let's see if that works. All right. You should be able to see the grain here now. Yeah. All right. So if we look, aside from the depth of focus being a little bit better on the left-hand side, okay, we can see how even in the brighter areas at 6400, we're seeing a significant increase in noise. It's more prevalent here. Okay. But if we look at the comparison between our shadow side and our bright side, it's more noticeable in the dark areas. Okay. We can look at the bright areas and it's pretty much hidden, it's camouflaged. Okay. Where we really notice it again is in the dark, flat field areas of an image. Okay. Everybody sees the difference? Okay. So one of the things that you might want to do is run a little bit of a test and see what kind of noise you get at extreme ends. Now, why am I pointing this out? Okay. Here they are side by side. Okay. Displayed on screen. Can you tell the difference? Can
Barely.
you?
Barely.
Barely. One looks a little bit sharper than the other, right? This one's a little sharper because it's got more depth of focus. That one's a little bit, softer because it's got a shallow depth of focus. But as far as noise is concerned, you really can't tell which one is noisy and which one isn't. Okay? So a lot of the misinformation that I hear a lot is, oh, don't push your ISO above X. Okay, like I said, it used to be 800. Okay, then it became don't go above 1600. Oh, don't go above 3200. All right, here it is at 6400. All right, two images side by side. You can't tell which one is noisy and which one isn't unless you pixel peep. Unless you print. Okay. All right. And I'm not talking about making little 4x6 prints. All right. And to be honest, you could probably even get away with printing an 8x10 without doing very much to the noise. All right. If you print large, that's when you might want to consider something as far as mitigating the noise. Because the larger you print, the more noticeable that noise is going to be because we're actually enlarging it, all right, for our viewing distance, as far as our viewing distance is concerned. Okay. So a lot of people are like, well, I don't like putting my camera on high ISOs because I'm going to get noise. All right. Fine. But what is the side effect to that? You're not going to get a shot. So you're telling me you would rather not get the shot because you're afraid of pushing your ISO up too high. I have a different philosophy. I'd rather get a grainy shot than no shot at all. All right? Especially if it matters. All right? If my grandson just started playing football. All right? Football games are usually done later in the day. And as you know, it's starting to get darker and darker earlier. So guess what I'm going to do? I can't use flash because, it's a big open field. It's not going to do anything. So I'm going to jack up my ISO. All right. I'd rather get the shot of him playing that's kind of grainy than not get it at all. All right. If you are a wedding photographer and you are supposed to be photographing in a place where you can't use flash, which is most churches, all right, what are you going to do? Explain to the bride and groom, yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't use flash and I didn't want to bring my camera to a high ISO, so I didn't take any photos. How's that going to go with your client?
Not well.
Not well at all. Not well at all. Okay. All right. So don't be afraid to bring your ISO up. All right. The only time you really need to be concerned about it is under very specific situations. Okay. If you're a pro photographer, then yes, noise, especially higher noise content in your image, is going to present a problem. Okay. But there are ways of mitigating that. All right. Um, let's see. The next. All right. So that was where I raised the ISO, but I kept the shutter speed the same. All I did is I manipulated the aperture setting to change my exposure. All right. So I said, okay, well, in back in the film days, there was a thing called reciprocity. And reciprocity meant that if you took something like ISO 400 film, all right, now remember back in the film days, once you load up a certain ISO, it's not like, you can change the ISO at any point, okay? Without removing the film and putting in a different ISO. So if you had ISO 400 and you needed to take pictures in a darker environment, guess what? You're still stuck at ISO 400. All right. And so what ended up happening is, in order to be able to get low light images, you would do what? Open up your shutter. All right. Let it go open a little bit longer. Okay. And what happens is, when you are within the working range of the film, you are okay. But if you start going to like really long exposures, all right, what happens is you exceed the range of what the chemical process of the film can handle, all right, and then all of a sudden you would just blow out your film, all right. It would reach that peak, all right, and then I'm probably explaining it the wrong way. I'm trying to simplify it as best I can, but it's called film reciprocity, where if you exceed the value of the chemical process, you're pretty much screwed. Okay. We kind of sort of have that here with digital, and it's gotten a lot better over the years. Okay. Now, the difference between film and digital is film was very sensitive to light, whereas today we're very sensitive to shadow areas. Okay. With digital, it's very easy to blow out highlights, and it's very easy to recover information from shadow areas. Okay. Because digital's better in the shadow parts than it is with the light parts, surprisingly. Okay. But there is such thing as reciprocity. And what happens is a lot of people who do astrophotography, they find that if you leave your sensor open to light for too long a period, you start getting a buildup of noise. All right. Like I said, it's gotten better as technology has progressed. So if you have an older camera, this may be a problem. All right. And what they discovered was that in order to control that, you have to find that balance of using your aperture to handle a bulk of the amount of the light that comes in. All right. Using your ISO to handle a lot of that. All right. But if you want to mitigate your noise, you didn't max out your ISO. Okay. Because that just creates too much noise, all right? So you bring your ISO down and then you expand your shutter. But if you expand it too much, what's happening is you're starting to gain noise from the sensor being open for too long, all right? Because in essence, it's doing the same thing as if you were boosting your ISO, all right? So that little photocell that's collecting light, okay? When there's a lot of light, it collects really, really quickly, all right? Not a big deal. But when it's very, very dark, that sensor collects light very, 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 very slowly, okay? And the adjacent one may not collect it at the same rate. It may be a little bit faster than its neighbor, who collects it maybe even a little bit faster, all right? So now we are extending the amount of time that we're leaving the shutter open, and now the photocells that should max out at the proper exposure are now getting more light. So now we get what's called a hot pixel. A hot pixel is pretty much an over bright pixel, all right? And this just intensifies the noise because you can see all these bright pixels, all right? So I decided I was going to run a test and see how my camera would handle this situation. So I went from, let's see, ISO 100. Let me bring this up. 1.3 seconds, or so 1 1/3 second at f4.5 at ISO 100. Okay. And I got this exposure, okay? And I try to maintain the same exposure as all my previous shots, okay? This one, I went to 4 seconds, all right? But I upped the ISO to 200. This one is 1/5 of a second, all right, at ISO 400. And so on, 1/8 of a second at 800. So as my shutter is going faster, I am compensating by increasing my ISO, all right? So as my time value shrinks, my ISO increases, okay? So that's the test, all right? And then ISO 1600, and finally 1/40th of a second at ISO 3200, and 1/80th of a second at ISO 6400. Okay. So why is this important? Okay. Well, if you're shooting anything that's got any kind of movement, what's the requirement? You need something that has a slightly faster shutter speed in order for you to mitigate or minimize any kind of blur, right? Makes sense? Standard exposure practices, okay? So in order to get that higher shutter, I need to increase my ISO. All right, so here it is. I'm maxed out on my ISO, 1/80th of a second. All right, so let's take a look at the first and the last. Okay. And let's go ahead and zoom in here. All right. And here is ISO 100 at 1.3 seconds. Okay. So it's 1 1/3 of a second. So it's a long shutter. Okay. And you can see that the noise is very much controlled, okay? Which I was surprised, but to tell you honestly, I did not push my camera beyond this. So I don't know what it would do at 5 seconds or at 10 seconds. Unfortunately, I ran out of time to do those experiments. And I might do that just, for my own information, and see if I get any kind of digital noise due to reciprocity on the longer exposure times. Okay. But you can see that even at a very fast shutter speed of 1/80th of a second, all right, at 6400, the noise is very prevalent. Okay. So shutter, unless I'm going to very extremes that I have not tested yet, doesn't seem to affect my noise. As a matter of fact, keeping my ISO low and being able to put my camera on a tripod and shoot my scene, at 1, even probably 2 seconds, not going to affect my noise. Right? So it's good to know my camera can handle that. Right? Where it fails is if I need to capture any kind of action in low light. And I think every camera is going to have that issue. All right? So now here's the trick. All right? Because there are going to be times where there's no avoiding shooting at high ISOs. Because like I said earlier, you either shoot at high ISO or you miss your shot. Okay? And I'd rather get the shot and have noise to contend with than miss the shot and have a, pissed off client to contend with. All right, so what can we do? All right. Here is where it gets a little bit interesting. Okay. All right, let me zoom in. Actually, let me go back to 100. There we go. Okay. So this is at 1/40th of a second at ISO 6400. Okay. And you can see we have a lot of noise. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me go to the 200. Okay. Everybody see all that noise? Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right. Now, obviously, for screen, like I said earlier, probably doesn't matter. All right. It's a personal thing. And if it matters, throw it into some kind of, denoise AI or Luminar AI or Lightroom denoise, and you can mitigate that a little bit. Okay. Not a big deal. But you can see at this resolution on a screen, I'm looking at it, on my monitor, you really can't tell there's noise at all. Okay. So for general use, doesn't matter. Okay. But when it does become an issue, all right, here's one of the tricks that you can use. All right. This was shot at a proper exposure, meaning my camera was set to record this so that straight out of camera, this is the exposure I get. It's a proper exposure for the scene that I set up. Everybody sees that, right? The skull is properly exposed. The bottle is properly exposed. I got a good exposure range going on. Nothing is blown out. Nothing is crushed. Okay? The only thing that's wrong with this image is the high noise level. All right? Now, I can reduce the noise, or I can do something like this. This is one stop over. Okay? And I want you to see something. Okay?
Are you saying one stop over proper exposure?
One stop over proper exposure. So it's one stop brighter than what I want. Okay? So if we were to, And here, I'll just show you this. This is now 2 stops brighter. Okay. So if we look at this, all right, my background's supposed to be black. It's not. It's more or less almost middle gray. Not quite, but getting close to middle gray. All right. And you can see all that noise. All right. So making it brighter, okay, not necessarily reducing any noise. Okay. All right. Next one down. All right. 1/20th still at 6400. And then this one, which is our proper exposure, 1/40th of a second, still at 6400. All right. I'm going to take all 3 of those and let's see. Okay. Now I'm going to go into the develop module. Okay. All right. What I'm going to do is I am not going to touch that first one. Okay. The one that's properly exposed, I'm not going to touch it. Okay. The one that is 1 stop overexposed, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my exposure down -1. Okay. So now, if we compare my original to my +1, you can see that the exposures are almost the same, right? Okay. And then the one that's 2 stops over, I'm going to go ahead and go to my exposure. Okay. And I'm going to go -2. All right. So that's 2 stops under. So you can see it brings the exposure now to the same level as my original. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Okay. Notice how the exposure, they all look the same. Right? They all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
This one was shot at one stop over, and this one was shot at 2 stops over. Okay? All I did was when I edited, I brought my exposure down 1, and on this one, I brought the exposure down 2 stops. That's all I did. I didn't touch anything else. Okay?
How does that affect the noise?
Aha! That's what we're going to see now. Okay? Let's zoom in. Okay? This is my, let's see, let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Here's my original. Okay, and if you want, you can take a look at here. All right, I labeled these all the same except this is +0, and then you're going to see a +1 and a +2. That way you know which one is which. Okay, all right. This is shot at the proper exposure. This one here, let me bring this over here, was shot at 1 stop over proper exposure. All right. Look at the significant difference in our noise. Okay. And then this one here was 2 stops. All right. 2 stops over. All right. And all I did was I reduced the exposure by 2 stops, and look. Literally no grain. None. Zip, zilch, 0. All right. Well, maybe a little bit. Okay. But here's the trade-off. Had I gone to a +3, what would have happened to my highlights?
Oversaturated.
I probably would have blown them out. Yeah, I would have gone. What would have happened to my blacks? Okay. Well, probably not much. They would go more to yucky, gray. But the consideration is, you know, these highlights that were on the skull. Okay. Right. So, what do we get from this? It says, if you want to mitigate your noise, right, and you want to preserve your ability to shoot the scene, it's actually better to shoot and overexpose your scene by 2 stops. All right. Again, you have to watch your exposure range. All right. You don't want to go outside of the exposure range of the scene. All right. But it's better to shoot 2 stops overexposed, and then in editing, drop it down 2 stops, and it removes that noise. Okay. All right.
All right, I have a question.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, I'm going to shoot. I'm going to shoot the big moon tomorrow night, the
Okay.
harvest moon. So, as you always say, don't believe your camera. So
Yes.
I have to change because I'm taking a shot of the moon that's very, very bright with a black background. Do I still go over?
Okay. All right. Shooting the moon's a little bit of a unique. What's the moon supposed to be like tomorrow? Is it a full moon?
Yeah, tomorrow's the full moon, the
Full
big
moon.
one.
Okay. All right. That's a slightly different scenario. All right.
Okay.
Because what you are photographing is an object that is reflecting the sun.
Mhm.
All right. So it's not like my skull here that's just reflecting the, the low
Overhead lighting.
level. Right. All right. The moon is very, very bright. So in order to properly photograph the moon, you need to underexpose it.
Mm,
You have to underexpose it. Okay.
okay.
Shooting the moon. All right. You know the Sunny 16 rule.
I'm no, I do not.
Okay. So the Sunny 16 rule is basically says that when you are photographing something that's illuminated by the sun on a very bright sunny day, okay, ISO 100, okay. Well, no, ISO 100. You're going to set your aperture to f16. All right, so that's a sunny 16 rule. Sunny day, f16, ISO 100. Whatever your ISO is going to match your shutter, all right, to the closest full stop. All right, so the closest full stop to ISO 100 is 1/125th of a second.
It's in manual mode.
Manual mode. Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't matter what camera you're using. It doesn't matter what lens you're using. Bright sunny day, f16 on your lens, ISO 100. Set your shutter to 1/125th of a second. Take a shot. You'll have proper exposure. Okay. So now, what are we photographing? We are photographing an object that's being illuminated by the sun, all right, as if it was in bright daylight, okay? It just so happens that we are in a position of being in the shade, all right? So let's go back to our daylight, okay? Let's go back to our daylight. We take a model, we put the model in an open area. The sun is hitting directly on our model. We're going to set our aperture to f16. We're going to set our ISO to 100 and our shutter speed to 1/125th of a second. Okay? We take a photograph of that person standing in sunlight. Doesn't matter where we are standing. Trick question. Does it matter that we as the photographer are standing?
I, I'm going down a rabbit hole on this one. I'm going to say no.
No, and you're absolutely correct. All right,
Okay.
because it doesn't matter what kind of light is hitting us. I can be in pitch black. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what the camera is pointing to and what the camera is photographing. So if my model, the person I'm photographing, is standing out in the sun, I set my camera to f16, 1/125th of a second, ISO 100. Okay, and I'm going to get very, very close to a proper exposure. It's not going to be the greatest photo because obviously shooting in harsh sunlight is not the most ideal. All right, but I'm using that as an example very specifically because if we substitute the person with the moon, right? The moon is getting the same light that the person standing in the open field is. Correct?
So you would actually use the same settings?
Start at the same setting. Start at the
Wow.
same setting. Okay? You may have to tweak it because obviously the moon is going to be, full and probably shoving a lot more light in your direction. All right?
Where would
So,
be your focus point? Off
it,
to the side or directly on the moon?
well, you're not going to be able to focus uh, uh, because the moon's just too far away. Okay?
Infinity.
So
Yeah,
most
just
people,
just below infinity.
you adjust for infinity and you rack it back just,
Right.
yeah, just a hair. Okay, and you'll be good to go. All right. Now the trick is, a lot of people think, oh, I need a slow shutter, in order to get it, but not on a full moon. Okay. The full moon, you want a faster shutter because we got to keep in mind that there's two moving parts to photographing a moon. All right. May not seem it, but the moon is traveling around us, right? So the moon is moving across our horizon, all right, and we're spinning. So that amplifies the movement. Okay? That's why you can actually stand there and, for half an hour, you'll be able to track the moon as it goes across the sky. All right? And when you have your camera on a tripod, if you leave your shutter open too long, the moon's going to blur because the moon is moving. Okay? So in order to stop the action, what's the key part of stopping action? You need a fast shutter. Okay? Make sense?
Okay. Oh, definitely. It makes a lot of sense. If I had the ability to go under 100 ISO, do I go under? My camera goes on to 64.
I don't think you need it.
Okay, that was the answer I was looking for. Not necessary.
Yeah. So use that to start. Zoom in, on your uh, LCD screen and adjust from there. Okay. The other thing you have to understand, and I wish I had a picture of a moon. I don't know if I have a picture of a moon.
I have one if you want me to share.
Well, I want it to be able to let's see. Oh, I do have. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Actually, let me move this over here. 1, 2, 3. And tab. Okay. Um, Okay, so here is this one here. Let's see. Uh, 15th of a second. All right, f8 ISO 400. Okay, that's the moon. All right, what's wrong with this photo?
Blown out.
Blown out. It's overexposed. I wasn't paying attention. Okay, my ISO was at 400. All right. Here it is at ISO 100. Okay. All right. 1/60th of a second at f11. Okay. So now, if we do a little bit of math, all right, what's one stop up from f11?
F8.
No, up, not down.
Okay, sorry. F13.
F16. All right.
16? Okay.
F16.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. And what's one stop down from 1/160th of a second?
Probably 1/125th.
1/125th. Look at this exposure. Is that a proper exposure?
Looks it to me.
Yeah. Here, let me zoom in. Look at that. Nice, 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 nice. Okay. I missed my focus, but my exposure was dead on.
I just looked at my 3 photos from 11 years ago on a supermoon. 2 of them were 1/125th of a second, and one was 1/160th of a second. And for 2 of them, I had the f-stop. I had f-stop. Yeah, I had aperture at f8 and a couple and f11, and both of them I used an ISO of 200. All 3 of them, I meant to say.
Mm-hmm. All right. This one here, I increased my shutter speed. All right, 1/1000th of a second, but I also increased my ISO setting to 400 to compensate for the loss of light. Okay, and you can see the details a little bit sharper. Okay, but then again, I'm really blowing up my image a lot.
What focal length did you use?
F11. F11.
Focal length.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's see, what was I using? 400.
Okay, I don't have
400 millimeter.
that.
So tomorrow's the full moon. Maybe I'll bring my camera home and reshoot this at different settings just so I have it on hand. All right. But yeah, the trick is you want to be fast enough so that the movement of the moon doesn't affect the image. So
that's where I'll start at
Okay.
1/60th of a second and f11 at 100 ISO.
yep. Or you can do the Sunny 16. F16, 1/125th at 100.
Yeah, in between. So that's not far apart.
They're
Yeah,
both the
that's-
exact same.
Yeah,
They're both the exact same exposure. The only
Very good.
difference is one is slightly faster shutter. Okay. So you can go to, you know, let's see, 1/60th, you know, 2/50th of a second at f8. Actually, here we go. Camera settings. All right. So if you increase on one, you're going to decrease on the other. Okay. So let's see. I don't have my. All right. Where's my F16? All right. So here's F16. All right. And then over here we have, where's 1/25th right here. Okay. The frame of my friggin' I use a teleprompter, so my frame of my teleprompter is hiding some of those numbers. Okay. So, all right, F16, right? ISO 100, right? Shutter speed, the closest to your ISO in full stops. Okay. You can go to 100. That'll be like a third of a stop difference, but probably not going to make a big difference. But anyway, so if you decide, well, I want a faster, all right, shutter. Okay, so here is the one stop faster, right? One stop faster. What do we need to do? Okay, if we added one stop here, okay, so this is +1. All right, we got to do something to the other one or both of the others. Okay.
Would you raise the f-stop to 22?
All right. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. This is -1. All right, because faster will reduce our exposure -1. Okay, so we either have to +1 here or +1 here. Okay, which is okay, +1 here. Okay, either or. Okay, if we do the same thing here, all right, this will be -2. We have to go +2, so this will be 400, and then where are we? +2 here. Okay, makes sense? If we take away here, we have to add somewhere. We have to add somewhere in order to maintain that balance.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Just remember, once this goes above a certain level, we start introducing noise.
What do you mean by going over a certain level?
All right. Depending on your camera. All right. It could be ISO 1600. It could be ISO 3200, or it could be 6400. All right. You saw what it did with my camera.
Right.
All right. At 1600, that's when I started seeing it. And at 6400, it was very noticeable. Okay. So keeping this low is going to be your friend. All right. So instead of adding 2 here, maybe add 2 here. Okay. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Lowering the f-stop, you're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. So if we go up on our shutter, all right, we are taking light. So we need to add light somewhere. So by opening up our aperture, we're adding more light. Okay. It's step balance.
All right.
Okay. All right, guys. Any questions on anything that was covered?
No, I thought got a little bonus there.
Yep. Little.
But maybe tomorrow I have to shoot 25 instead of 2,500 photos to get one good one.
All right. Let me Stop share. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. I might bring my camera home and
Yeah.
shoot the moon.
I think sunset is like at six and
6:30.
change, 6:10.
6:10. Oh, that early? 6:10?
Well, sunset, but then the moon comes up at almost 7, something like that.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
I have a question,
Yeah.
and nobody's been able to answer this for me. I can see a chart of when the sun is going to rise and set and what percentage of the moon we're going to have. I cannot find anything that shows what direction it is going to be in. Anybody know that?
Oh,
East.
the photo ephemeris.
You gotta pay for
What's
that.
that?
You gotta pay for that one.
No.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The desktop version you don't.
Okay.
The mobile version, I believe you do.
Okay. Photo.
On my
What?
on my cell phone, let me pull it up. Where is it? For my cell phone, I use a product called Photo Pills. Photo Pills. Great app, right?
Mhm.
And here you can see it. It even has one for the moon. Okay.
Okay.
And what it does is it uses your GPS position to figure out where you are, and then it'll pull up the Google Maps, and you're able to kind of like play around with that. And here, actually, let me pull up photo ephemeris.
Duck, what did you use when we were taking the pictures of the Q Bridge a few years back
Photo
to
pills.
figure out?
Well, actually, I used both. Hey, thank you, Bob. I used both. I did my pre-planning with the photo ephemeris website. Simply because I like looking at it on a large screen, which my desktop allows. Okay, but once I'm out in the field, I'll pull this out with photo pills. The nice thing about photo pills is there is a segment there that's it's called. Let me pull it up again here. Night AR, Night AR, okay, which is which what it does is it uses your camera, okay, and you're able to see through the camera. You're able to see whatever the camera's pointing at, all right, and what it does is it superimposes a map of the stars of the heavens, okay, and you can see the track of the sun and the track of the moon. You can see where the Milky Way is, where the eye of the Milky Way is, all right, and you can then take your you're pointing it, you open up you're pointing it around, and wherever you're aiming at, okay, that map is going to change, so you can say, oh, there's the Milky Way. You're seeing it live on your screen, all right? And whatever the camera's pointing at is being recorded and well, not recorded, but presented to you on your screen. So you can see in real time where, you like if you're in the landscape, I'm getting a lot of noise in my background. All right, you'll see, all right, well, there's the tree line, and right above, that's where the moon's going to be. So now you know where to place your camera and where to aim it. All right, so now as the moon, and you'll be able to see the path that the moon is traveling on, or the path that the Milky Way is traveling on. Okay, so you can get into position and say, okay, the moon is coming up at this angle, and it's, you have all the other data as to where, what time the moon's supposed to crest the horizon. All right. And then all you got to do is wait, and then it says, oh, there it is. And then click, click, click. So between both photo ephemeris and
Photopills.
photopills, yeah. All right, so let me go to the desktop. And let me go ahead and share desktop, share. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's still set up from the last time I did the, trying to shoot the moon at the beach down
That was
in
last year.
yeah. Yeah. So here it is. Okay. This orange line here is what? That's our sunrise. This is our sunset. Okay. This line here, that's our moonrise. Okay.
Ooh.
You can plug in whatever date you want. All right. So obviously you want September 17th is tomorrow. All right, here it is. Okay. As a matter of fact, if I move my pin to where, right here, right on Walnut Beach. Okay. All right, let me zoom in a little bit here. Okay. That's where I need to stand if I want to capture the moon coming up over Charles Island. All right. And the moon will be coming up tomorrow, moonrise 6:54. 6:54. Okay. That means it's just going to start cresting at 6:54. Okay. But sunset behind you is going to be at 6:57. All right. So, all right. And it gives you your civil, nautical sunsets and all that good stuff. So, photoephemeris.com. Photoephemeris.com. Okay.
Tell us again what those colors are. I see yellow, green,
Yep,
and blue.
yeah. So everything is listed right here on this bar down here.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. See this one at sunrise. All right. Right here. Okay. That orange color is this orange color. Let me go. That orange color is this orange color. Sunrise. All right. The darker orange for sunset is this color. All right. So if I'm standing here on Walnut Beach, all right, looking out over the water, that's where my sunrise is going to be. And behind me over the rooftops of the houses, that's where the sunset's going to be. Okay.
Cool.
So now you say, okay, well, if I want to get a little bit of a sunset without rooftops, where do I have to stand? Well, pretty much nowhere in Connecticut. Connecticut, you can't get good sunsets.
No.
You can get good, partial sunsets just as it starts coming down. But yeah, that's it. You can get good sunrises. You can't get good sunsets. All right. So photo ephemeris for the desktop, photo pills for your phone. Those are the two that I use. I highly recommend. Photo pills. I think you have you have to purchase it, but it's very inexpensive.
Yeah, it was a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
That's all it was. And it's
Oh,
for good.
okay.
Oh,
All right.
it's a couple bucks and it stays with you forever.
Yep, that's it. Buy it once and that's it. Oh,
Now, I have another question. Here I am sitting in my house in Plainville, and I never know that if there's going to be a good sunset until it happens. And here I am here, and it's like, what's that? I can't, there's no place to get a good sunset here. Nice cloud, nice orange sky. How can I tell ahead of time if I'm going to have, there's no way to know?
no. The only thing you can do is determine where the sun is going to set, the direction. Okay.
Mhm.
So, with photo ephemeris, you can look at the map and say, okay, there are certain high points within Connecticut that allows us to get a, pretty wide view. All right. Unfortunately, most of them are in state parks, and most state parks shut down at sunset. So you may need
Yes.
to finagle some, permissions for it. But, you know, get up high, Talbot Mountain, Sleeping Giant, what's the one in Meriden?
Hubbard Park,
Hubble Park. Yeah.
Castle Craig, Hubbard Park.
Yep. So from there, you're able to probably get a decent sunset from those high vantage points. Okay. But all you can figure out with these maps is where to point your camera. All right. And what time is that sun going to set? Everything else is weather dependent. All right. Cloudy skies, you're not going to get, a really nice sunset. You need one that's got, fairly sparse clouds. Okay. No clouds, hey, that'd be great. You get that nice gradation, but you need that atmospheric haze in order to get those vibrant colors. So it's very dependent on the weather. You're not going to get a great sunset in the wintertime, usually because there's not enough, atmospheric haze in the air. The cold air tends to push, all that down. So, whereas on a warmer, humid days, we get all that vapor that's coming up off the ground. That's going to give us all that beautiful light diffraction and give us all those nice colors. Okay, that doesn't mean you can't fake it in Photoshop. or if there's even if there's a little bit there, you might be able to pull it out in Lightroom. Okay. The other thing is, is you have to take into account that we are dealing with two exposures. One for the sky, one for the ground. You expose for the sky, what happens to the ground?
Very dark.
Goes pitch black.
Yes.
Okay. If you expose for the ground, what happens to your sky?
You blow it out.
You blow it out. All right. Or at the very worst, you don't get that nice saturation of colors. Okay. So I always recommend do an exposure bracket. Expose one for the sky, expose one for the ground. All right. And then marry the two together.
Okay.
Okay. But you want something of interest in the foreground if you're going to do that.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. Any other questions? Any questions on anything we covered with noise?
Yeah. Once you finish the recording, I got to talk to you for 2 seconds.
Okay, sure. All right. Remind me not to do what I did last time.
You fixed that, I'm sure.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. All right.
Hey, I have a quick question before we
Sure.
we touched on this subject a couple months ago, I think. Mats and frames and that kind of thing. And I believe Bill mentioned he had a source for a mat where you actually could slide it in the sleeve so there was a backing behind the picture.
Yes.
I went looking for that and couldn't find it.
Oh, hold on one second.
And then there's a second part. Um, has anyone ever gotten involved with doing their own mat cutting? And I started looking into mat cutters a little bit, and it looks like there's a couple inexpensive ones, but it also looks like you can get pretty crazy pretty quick.
I did mat cutting back in the day when I worked at Charette Pro Graphics in New Haven back in the 90s. Um, to be honest, if you're not doing anything in bulk, probably not worth the expense. All right. Um, the benefit of cutting your own mats is saving money. You're not saving time. You're saving money. Okay. But you're saving money in the long run. All right. Because the mat material comes in large sheets. All right. And from one large sheet, you can get multiple mats out of it. All right. And the nice thing is, you have a large mat, you cut out the inner part, you can use that inner part for a smaller, cut that for a smaller image. Okay? So from one large image, you can get, a second mat out of the from the waste material. Okay? So it's not like all that goes to waste. All right. So you make up, a little bit on that. Uh, the only thing is, obviously, if all you need is one or two mats every so often, is it is it cost effective to put all that money into getting a mat cutter and then, putting all that money into buying large mat sheets? All right. When you can just simply go to a framing shop and they'll cut a custom one for a few bucks.
And maybe
Or you
that's the
can,
solution.
yeah.
My project I'm looking at here is we helped someone out a couple years ago, and I have, I think, 10 frames that have pictures in them right now, and they're pretty good size and they're nice frames.
Mm-hmm.
And so my project is to deframe them, if you will, or reframe them and put
Okay.
my pictures in them.
Yeah.
And if that includes, maybe even repainting them, but I thought some of them might need mats, and I've been just starting to research that. Is it better just to have someone cut the mat or do the mat? I've done some of that in the past. Anyway, that's what but I would like to, just to get some things on the wall, is to get something that I can slide in and just hang the picture
Mm-hmm.
on the wall. That's what I was
Brian,
asking about.
if you go into chat and copy and paste the link that I just pasted, I know that's sort of long. That's because I put it up on Facebook at the North Haven Camera Club page, and Facebook likes to.
Oh, that is big. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So a mat cutter. All right. Uh, mat cutters, like anything else, comes in different, grades of quality. All right. Obviously, if you want, you can just get a metal straight edge and one of those little handheld blade cutters, and then pray that you get it
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Or you can invest in an actual mat cutter. All right. You can get a little portable for about $200, or you can get a desk one. I'm looking at one here for $1,600. Are you going to invest $1,600 in a mat cutter?
Well,
I
see, actually,
wouldn't.
I saw some out there for like just a handheld, and it was very reasonably priced, much less than 200 even. So that's what
Yeah,
got me thinking.
yeah,
And
150 to 200 to 250 will get you a decent one. All
yeah,
right. Just realize there are trade-offs. All right.
right.
the ones that I found, the better ones, man, they glide like
Yeah.
butter. Okay. The $200 ones, you're going to put some muscle into it. Okay. And you have to be careful that as you put stress on it, what ends up happening is that blade tends to shift a little
Wobble.
bit. Yeah. All right. So you often need to do a couple of passes. So you have to be careful how you cut your mats. Okay.
Maybe I'll make friends with a mat cutter.
Make friends with a mat cutter. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Brian, I just
Now,
shortened the link.
I've already copied it and got it.
Okay, all
Yeah, you
right,
can. There's a thing in here where you can just copy or take you right to the link. So it already took me there. So
good, perfect.
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm glad I saved this stuff someplace, or I forget it.
awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Yeah. So, is it expensive to get into mat cutting? Well, obviously no. You can get into it for about $500. But again, if you're not doing $500 of worth of mat cutting for your project, is it worth it? You know, the other side to that is mat and framing your images goes beyond just the mat. All right, there's also the backing. All right, you can either use mat board to back your images, or what most people do is they use foam board, foam core board to do their backings. You know, so
Oh,
there's
that leads me to another question. Sorry for
no,
interrupting.
it's all right.
Back when I used to do photography back in the early 70s, but they would actually, there was a special kind of glue paper and they'd mount them to these things, and there was a heat press situation, and
Yes.
you had to find someone who had that, equipment.
Yeah.
So nowadays, is there some sort of spray glue that you mount to the board, or these foam
Yes,
boards, do
there
they come
is.
with
Uh,
sides sticky?
yeah, you can. Um, like I said, when I was doing it in the '90s, we had a roller press that you line up all your stuff, you shove it under the roller on one end, the roller would turn and spit it out all nice and completely
Okay.
done for you on the other side. But that's a multi-thousand-dollar piece of equipment this shop had, which that machine got used daily, for pretty much everything. Um, but not everybody has that. So yes, technology has gone better. You can use spray adhesives, all right, and all that does is it prevents the print from warping in the frame. That's all it does. You're just attaching
Right.
the print to whatever backing material you're using. Usually, like I said, usually foam board. All right. Um, but the thing is, so let's say you have 20 frames that you need to work through. All right. If all the 20 frames are standard sizes, and you're going to be using standard size images within those the mats, okay, do the math. All right, what's it going to cost to buy pre-cut mats for all 20 frames versus outfitting myself to be able to cut and create 20 mats? Okay. Now, where you might find the advantage is if you need to cut custom mats, all right, because you have custom sizes for your images, all right. Most frames, they tend to be standard sizes, unless you're doing a custom print, then you're going to do a custom mat and a custom frame for it. But overall, off the shelf, they're pretty standard price sizes. Okay, so if all you're doing is using standard sizes, figure out the math. It's probably easy. All right. If you're going with plain white mat board, that's even less expensive, and you can probably order them in bulk. All right. So instead of buying, a one of, You know, so maybe they sell, you know, a pack of 10 pre-cut mats, right?
That's
They're
what I was
saving.
looking for Bill for that side
Yeah.
of it. But those
Okay.
10 frames I told you about, they tend to be large. They look like they might have been custom made, or the everything looks like custom. And my project is to see how low dough I can frame these things up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So
You know, so yeah, it's just a matter of figuring out, you know, doing the math and figuring
yeah.
out what is going to be beneficial. You know, run the numbers.
Is
Okay.
Michael's a good local joint to go to for framing stuff, or is there other places around, or just
My experience at Michael's, the one in Southington is not that good. I've had good luck in North Haven. I've had good luck at the one near West Farms Mall. Unfortunately, AC Moore was even better.
Yeah, and
They
Durham.
merged with Michael's and they closed the AC Moore. I used to drive up here to go to AC Moore. And AC Moore used to have deals like buy one, get the second one half
Yeah.
price and stuff like that. And that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, you know, you got people who are really not trained all that well, or not at all. You know, working minimum wage. And
Yeah. If you're paying a high school kid
yeah.
and he's working in a big store like Michael's that sells all sorts of stuff, he's not going to be able to know specialty. If
Right.
you're looking, I know this is not your project, but someone at Milford Photo told me that they will do custom mats for you.
Yes, they will. Absolutely. And they have the nice machines to do it with.
Hmm. How I found out was I was on one of their classes and somebody said, hey, frame, size your picture for the subject, and said something like, don't deal with, if it's best to use something that's not a standard, go use it. And I said in class, well, what happens if, the mats are a certain size and somebody from Milford Photo wrote, oh, you can come in and get custom framing.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, you're going to pay for that custom framing,
Uh-huh.
you know, but,
actually though,
you
when
know,
you mentioned the foam board backing, I've had Milford Photo do a couple photos for me just to see how it is. Maybe just even subcontracting that part of it out too. They've got 2 or 3 different levels of backing they'll put on for you. That's
yeah. And
comes with the picture. If you
if you do any kind of image competitions where you're submitting prints, you know, at that point you want something. You're looking for a hinged mat, so you have
right.
the mat backing and the mat frame, and the ability to interchange your images within that mat.
Yeah, that's the link Bill gave me, so I want to give that a shot. So,
Let me help.
alrighty. Well, thank
Let
you,
me
Doug.
No
let me
problem.
know how that works out.
I will.
All right, guys, we've come to the end. Nice little discussion there, especially about the moon. Love that one. Any last minute announcements anybody want to make? Anything coming up your way? No? Okay. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. We
Just
will,
one thing,
yeah.
just to plug North Haven Camera Club. They have a guest speaker for every meeting, for every regular monthly meeting, all the way through the end of the year, including Duck in January. So we meet the second Monday of the month. And second, no, second
Tuesday,
Tuesday,
Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday of the month. We're here the second Monday of the month. And so they've got guest speakers, and I think most of them, if not all of them, are on-prem. I know Duck is. And there'll be additional speakers for a third Tuesday of the month. They may be offline. So
Wow. Look at you guys go.
I was surprised how they filled up the year this quickly.
Yeah, yeah. See, you guys are doing it right. I don't know what we're doing wrong at CTPPA. Oh, did I say it out loud?
You're going to have to censor again.
No, they know my feelings. I don't have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Saturday's event was a CTPPA event. I was hosting it. We had one person show up from CTPPA. All right. Another one was a past member. All right. So not even an active member, you know. So go
Yeah,
figure.
Yeah,
look at the turnout you had for the beginner show. I mean, I think you had 17 people there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was
That
huge.
was that was that was awesome.
There's, I'm glad to see a lot of interest in photography. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not dying. There's an art. They're interested.
Yes. Very much
I
so.
bumped into somebody yesterday, a young guy, he must be in his 30s. He came up to me. I was having wine. Yeah, you could keep this in. I was having wine in the at a winery, Aragonia, I believe it's called. Yeah, And are you a photographer? And I thought to myself, do I have it written over my face? I said, yes. And he said, were you in a meetup group? I said, yeah, there were a couple of them. Are there any? And I said, no, there isn't. I introduced myself to him. He said his name. I said, I remember you now. And I'll tell you in a minute why I remember him. He said he was in Shutterbuds,
Okay. Yeah.
and he did not know that it had gone away. I said, Sue ran it for 8 years, and uh, she did a lot of work.
Yeah.
And he said, he got a little disinterested because she was going a lot further away than just the area, and he was looking for that kind of a group. I said, "There's no Mid Connecticut, there's no Shutterbuds," and I said, "There's nothing. There is nothing on Meetup
Right.
that does that type of thing." I said, "There's North Haven." I said, "What town do you live in?" He said, "Middletown." I said, "There's North Haven Camera Club. There's Charter Oak Camera Club," but he wasn't interested in them.
Yeah. 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 If unfortunately the pandemic killed a lot of those
Everything,
groups,
yes.
it really did. And even post pandemic, nobody, there's not enough interest to invest in getting groups going. All right. So you guys know Colleen, right? Um, uh, Colleen's been wanting to do, group shots. Uh, and Greg Horn, I don't know if you guys know him. He likes going out and doing little group shots, just going out, get together, let's photograph something. So he's always saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? And it says, unfortunately, I don't have the time to put into these groups currently. So I go, why don't you do it? You host something. Oh, I don't know if I can do it. It's very simple. Just
Mhm.
post it on Facebook. Say, hey, I'm going to be here. We're getting together to shoot. If you want to join us, you join us. If you don't, you don't. No big deal. Okay. And every time he's done it, he's gotten 2 or 3 people that come out and join him. And he
Mhm.
always says, oh, I had such a great time. So and so came out, and so was there, and so, showed up a little later. And it says, see, that's all it takes. That's all it takes. But yeah, every time it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. So, but, uh, um, but as far as formal groups, yeah, they're pretty much done, you know. Um, I know the steampunk community tries to do formal monthly get-togethers, all right, but that's a very niche group of people, and not everybody's into it, and not everybody wants to do that, month after month.
Yeah.
So yeah, And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to take up the mantle because it is a lot of work. Just ask Sue. Just
Yes.
ask, anybody who's ever run these groups.
Yes, I'm raising my hand.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's one of those jobs that nobody gives you credit for doing. As a matter of fact, they're going to be very quick to criticize and complain, as they kind of sit back on their laurel and go, "How come you're not doing anything?" Well, duh, you're the fat ass sitting on your ass waiting for me to do something for you to do something. So who should be complaining? So
Yeah.
go figure, human nature.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, guys.
Okay.
As always, it's a pleasure.
Same here.
We got 2 weeks left, right? Maybe I'll put something together for Patreon.
Good.
Let me know if there's any special interest in any particular topic. I'll put something together before the end of the month. Okay.
Good.
All right.
Okay, I'm still here.
Yep.
me
Just
close.
hang tight. Let me close off the recording, and I'll see you shortly. Everybody else, ciao.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.